So I'm watching Henry Louis Gates' Ancestor show on Channel 2 last night. And he has a movie star on. Well, I don't know who she was. She's a young movie star. And when they're going back through her ancestors, her grandfather started the town of Fargo.
It's over in East Arkansas, just north of Forest City.
Is it still around?
Yeah, there's the old Fargo School, and her grandfather may have done that. Is open now as a historical site. A lot of famous African Americans had roots in that part of the state.
He was a slave. He was freed. People don't realize this, but when they freed the slaves, all of them walked to Arkansas because we were known to be open-minded. We were very progressive. Arkansas was very progressive, and so thousands of slaves walked to Arkansas and set up homes here. And her father had 40 acres. He plotted it and started an African American or a slave community, freed slave community, really. She cried. She was so excited about it. It was just last night. So I was wondering if that was still around. Fargo is still around.
Still is. And we have some pretty interesting aspects of African American history that have gone largely unexplored. For instance, most of us don't realize the first African American to run for president was an Arkansan. A guy named George Edwin Taylor was born in 1857 here in Little Rock. His mom was a free black, one of 500 free blacks in the state. His dad was a slave, one of 500,000. And in 1859, 2 years after he was born, the Arkansas legislature passed a bill called the Free Negro Expulsion Act that basically said if you were free and black in Arkansas, like this young Taylor kid, you could be arrested and sold back into slavery. So he and his mom fled to St. Louis, and he wound up getting a good education in Wisconsin. And he was a very informative and favored speaker on this circuit back in those days, a newspaper man and all. In 1904, the National Negro Liberty Party drafted him as their candidate for president. So he ran against Teddy Roosevelt in 1904, African-American from Little Rock, and not many people realize that.
I had no idea.
So there's all those little tidbits like that are in my book.
We had more senators. I can't remember how many senators we had, African-American senators, in the late 1800s also. More than they've ever had. We had more senators, black senators, in Washington than we've ever had in history in the late 1800s.
And then the Jim Crow laws came in and ruined all that.
Changed it all.
Along those same lines, Kerry, we had a U.S. congressman from Little Rock named James Heintz. And in 1868, he was campaigning for U.S. Grant, and the local Klan folks tried to warn him off. They put a coffin on his door and said, you got to cut this out. But he was insistent that the newly freed slaves could exercise property rights and vote and do other things expected of common citizens. And the Klan assassinated him in 1868 in Monroe County. And to this day, there's not a single monument or marker in Arkansas about his assassination. He was the first sitting member of Congress to be murdered while in office.
I think I know what you need to do in your retirement. You're good at raising money. There you go.
Well, I've actually thought about doing some of those crowdfunding things because Mr. Heintz deserves some recognition.
I love that story. Abe Lincoln, you said, I read somewhere that you said Abe Lincoln worked
Yes, there's a little
logs.
town on Mississippi River north of present-day West Memphis, and there was a prominent plantation over there named Wapanaka Ferguson. Wapanaka was sort of his nickname, but there's now Wapanaka National Wildlife Refuge over there. And Lincoln worked for a short time for Colonel Ferguson during one of those trips when we went up and down the river on those Mississippi flatboats from Illinois. And he chopped cordwood, and he was there for a short time.
And he lived in northwest Arkansas.
Northeast.
Northeast Arkansas.
Yeah. And that's something you don't learn in your history books.
I know it. So I love your book. It's got each of these is a little essay, so they're only one page long. How many? You didn't number these. How many do you think there are essays?
There's
in
about
your book?
140 altogether. And I had over 300 to begin with, but I had to cull some out. Like I had read that Edgar Allan Poe lived in Arkansas, and I couldn't get that confirmed. I had read that Joseph Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy clan, had some Arkansas connections. And I talked to his official biographer, and he said, well, Mr. Rice, there are no files in the family files that I've seen that mention Hot Springs. And I said, well, Do you think those would be in the official files? I'm a sort of chronic smartass.
Yeah.
But I let it go. And so Kennedy fell by the wayside, and so did Aldo Leopold, who wrote the Sound County Almanac, because I didn't find much about him. And I'd also seen that pythons had gotten a start in southeastern Arkansas. But,
the snake?
Yeah, and I talked to the herpetologist, and he said that he doesn't think they're breeding yet. Those were the results of some irresponsible pet owners. But he also said with climate change, watch out.
Pythons in Arkansas. Acropolis.
Oh, yes. Back in the 1820s, I think some of our leaders were trying to be sort of grandiose in this new territory we had here called the Arkansas Territory. And they changed the name of Little Rock to Acropolis. And that is actually found on a bunch of maps published in the 1820, 1822 era. But it's short-lived, and it's back to Little Rock as a result.
Now, was the state you're talking about the city was named that, or the state capitol building was named that?
The city itself was named Acropolis.
I think that's a great name. It's a play on words, don't you think?
Yeah, it was, I think, based on some a fine building over in Greece.
That's right. That was on a hill.
Yes.
I mean, and then so they took Acropolis and turned it into Arcopolis.
Yes.
Which is really tricky for everybody out there, but
it looks funny on maps. But in my book, I think I actually show a map that shows Arcopolis, where Little Rock is presently located.